Hey guys, this is Jeff Raymond with Construction Over Coffee coming at you again for another episode this week. I have with me Dan Belcher. Dan, it's great to have you on the show. A little bit of background about Dan. Dan is the Director of Strategic Partnerships at NCCER down in Florida. His day-to-day duties include developing and fostering new and existing partnerships, informing and updating government, workforce, industry, and education sponsors about NCCER and its activities. Dan also assists companies, schools, and government agencies to understand and implement the workforce development resources to improve the construction industry as a whole and to further foster the growth of the craft profession. Dan also serves as the liaison between NCCER and several organizations to include ACTE, Skills USA, ACCE, NTHS, Advanced CTE, MCAA, and various AGC and ABC committees. Dan previously served on NCCER's Director of Workforce Development. Currently, Dan holds board positions with the National Technical Honor Society and the American Council of Construction Education. His former experience includes being the Career and Technical Education Consultant for the Education Service Center Region 11 in Fort Worth, Texas. He also served as the Director for Career and Technical Education for the Fort Worth Independent School District. Before that, he served on the Fort Worth ISD in a variety of positions, including the principal, vice principal, and teacher. Dan's been married to his wife, Linda, for over 25 years and has a son, Brantley, 19, and a daughter, Brooke, who's 17. Dan holds his undergraduate degree from the University of North Carolina and a master's in education from the University of Texas, Arlington. Dan, let's start a little bit about you and your journey and how you've got to where you are today.
Okay, well, thanks, Jeff. So, it was about 8 years ago, I was working in Fort Worth, Texas, and was overseeing about 150 career and technical education programs across North Texas. And NCCR had approached us to a kickoff of their Build Your Future initiative. And this was a sponsorship opportunity. It was an opportunity to do a career day where we were bringing hundreds and thousands of students together for hands-on experience about what the construction industry is. One of the things that we see right now is not so much the lack of education of what the industry does, it's a lack of awareness of what are the opportunities in the construction industry. So that's how I became familiar with the hierarchy here at NCCR and the people that work here in Fort Worth. When we worked as a CT director, I utilized NCCR training and curriculum within our programs, but that was just one of multiple programs that we used. Didn't think anything about it until I started getting more and more involved with them. From there, it was an opportunity to work very closely with them for a couple years to expand these offerings in programs, and then the opportunity to come in and start looking at how we work, how we develop craft training, how we work with organizations to give training into them is what led me to becoming the Director of Workforce Development here 8 years ago. And so it's a great opportunity. We are very excited about the new movement where NCCR is going to be going. 25 years ago, we started off as a very small organization that was devoted to 5 different crafts for training. And then today, 25 years later, we have over 50 different craft areas that we train in, as well as management and other areas of training for the maritime industry, as well as the power industry. So lots of things that we have going on.
And, you've kind of been on the front lines of seeing some of the changes that go not throughout just the construction industry, but across many industries. Maybe not as somebody who's working in the day-to-day labor, but in speaking with maybe different owners, different GCs, different folks that are out in the field, you've probably learned a lot about how the industries have changed over the years. What have been some of the biggest changes you've seen over the years both pre-pandemic and then obviously during the pandemic right now?
Well, one of the things that we've seen is this change in technology. The technology expands on a daily basis, and where does technology fit in? During the pandemic, we saw this not only with crew makeups, how many people are going to be allowed on a crew on a job site. How is training occurring at a job site? Are they doing more remote training? What are some of those extra precautions, the safety precautions that need to be put in place? Safety is number one rule on a job site as we go along. But what are those new requirements that have come out due to COVID and the pandemic, and how do organizations adapt to those? From the education side, it really has been this opportunity for programs to look at what does training look like? How do we have training occur? Is it a true face-to-face opportunity? That's what majority of the people, 99% of the people, we're doing. We're doing that training as a face-to-face, sit down in the classroom. I'm here with 20 other people, and we're going to learn, and then we're going to go out in the field, and we're going to do what we just learned about. Well, that's changed now. Simple fact that you have social distancing. How many people are going to be in a classroom setting? Can we start utilizing more technology as a remote learning opportunity, and can we have this spread out across an entire company? And can that training occur from one central location and have that distributed to multiple hubs or multiple job sites across a company, or even within an association? Can that training occur for multiple companies within association? So this idea of technology is the first thing that changed, and everybody had to jump on that bandwagon real quick. And there was a steep learning curve by several people of how to utilize technology. You can utilize technology to be okay, but then there's this opportunity to utilize technology to be very successful in the way you deliver training, you deliver meetings, you deliver any information out there to your crews or to your employees. And then that idea of how do we take safety that is, as I said, number one on a job site, but how do we make this very specific to tackling the idea of the pandemic that happened right now? And it's still going on. We're still going to see this progress over the next, nobody really knows how long. I think if we look back at this time a year ago, this was only supposed to be a 2-month issue we were going to have, and now seems we're in month 15 of 2020. I don't think we've really crossed over to 2021 yet. I think we're still in 2020.
Absolutely. Now with safety is always, it's a big priority and a big focus for folks in those industries. Training is another one. Speaking to folks that have been in the industry, a lot of them looked at training as something that was just done on the job. You showed up, you learned what you had to learn. If there was an all hands meeting where something needed to be covered, it was covered. But now there's been a shift, not only in what folks are being trained on, but how they're being trained on, those things, which you alluded to. What has been the biggest difficulty so far in the training? Is it implementing? Is it getting buy-in from everyone to be on board with the training? Is it something else?
It depends on the area that you are doing training in. A lot of times right now we're seeing organizations cut back simply because of financial difficulties. So one of the first areas that can be cut back and a lot of is training. Shouldn't be one of the first areas that's cut back, but we look at how do we reduce training? How do we move away from doing it ourselves? Do we partner with somebody else to do training? We want to make sure everybody's safe. We want to make sure that everybody's moving forward and learning as they go along. But how they do that specifically in this new type of environment. One of the things that I think that we need to look at is what are those makeups of the crew, and where does a company put an emphasis on? Does that training occur in the field? Does that training occur within a classroom? and who is going to be responsible for that? We have a lot of organizations that are looking for us for that example. How do we take our training programs, make them easier for individuals to go through? The classroom portion is one thing. Being able to go through a training program and understand what is done in a conceptual classroom book-based training program is one thing. The knowledge portion is one part. That hands-on component has been the tricky part for us to be able to have done for individuals. So the beauty of NCCR is there is a knowledge component and there's a hands-on component that individuals must complete. And it is that hands-on component that has held us up in multiple training locations, whether that is training in a high school program, a community college program, a prison system that is actually doing construction craft training. All these lockdowns have occurred where individuals are not able to do that hands-on component. And so that's been the biggest hurdle that we've had to address, is how do we get that knowledge passed on from the knowledge portion to this hands-on component that we have to deal with on a daily basis. Being able to know how to build something is fantastic. Being able to physically build something is totally different.
Experience trumps theory in that regard.
Yes, it does.
Now, do you see your training shifting to somewhat of a hybrid model where there's obviously an online or a distance-based learning, involvement, but is there any talk, any interest in perhaps getting a representative or a couple representatives out in the field working with these folks to train them hands-on?
And we've had the hybrid model available for people to utilize any way that they wanted to. We don't have a one size fits all way to do training. It can be designed and fit the company needs as they go along. So that hybrid model has always been available for people to take advantage of. What we've seen more is that more companies are trying to do that and implement that in a program that they had never done before. So, do they have the right equipment? Do they have the right people trained to be able to go out and do this? And so ramping up some of that training, internal training on how to utilize technology how to use technology in a environment that can be beneficial for everybody. And then really taking some of those individuals that were in the classroom, putting them in the field to really do some of that training in the field is another way that we've been able to see contractors move the needle on training that's occurring. It's still harder in some of those other areas where we see training occurring for that next generation coming into the industry.
You bring up a really good point, which is training and then the skills gap. Something we're really passionate about here is the next generation. Growing up, at least in my generation, the trades, the crafts, some folks refer to it as blue collar work. It was never really seen as a first choice option for a lot of folks. I remember growing up, a lot of the time, the trades or the crafts were seen as something that you did if you couldn't get into college, if your first choice of your career didn't work out, and even more negative connotations. And that's unfortunate because the trades are not only an option, but they're a great option for a lot of people. The mantra of go to school, get an education, get a degree, work in corporate, work on a computer, work in accounting, be a doctor. That's great. That works for some people. But for a lot of folks, myself included, that wasn't the path that many of us took. And one thing we're really passionate about here is letting people know that the trades, again, is not only an option, but it's a great option. It's very rewarding, both financially, and I think from a career perspective as well, it's rewarding for a lot of people. So how do you see companies addressing that skills gap in the market? And what are some steps you recommend that companies and individuals can take to narrow that gap and make these trades more viable for more people.
Well, I think we have to get away from that negative connotation that the trades are for other people.
Yes.
We refer to these skills as middle skill jobs. I think that's the worst connotation we can give
Mhm.
somebody. I do
Mhm.
not want a middle skilled electrician or middle skilled
Mhm.
carpenter. I want the best carpenter electrician that comes out of a program, and they're the ones that are going to come do work for me, or they're going to go work for the contractors that we have. NCCR has a program, our Build Your Future program, and this is a recruiting and image enhancement opportunity for people to learn about the construction industry. And it is really geared towards those individuals that are in high school or college, as well as some of those men and women that are in this transition phase. We've seen a number of individuals that have been displaced out of the hospitality industry due to the COVID and the pandemic, and they need to transfer over to jobs that are well paying jobs. And that's what the construction industry offers. So being able to look at our Build Your Future campaign, being able to utilize the resources that are available there, also being able to look at our construction career pathways program that we have, which is a combination of how do we get industry and education talking about these exact issues, and what is that plan to make a seamless connection between a high school CTE program, community or technical college, and industry, and how do we make this a smooth transition so that, as you said, whatever that path is for an individual after they graduate from high school is some sort of post-secondary education, whether they go on to a 4-year construction management degree at a university or a community college, or do they continue and go into the trades and they're on their tools for a certain period of time, and then they work with their contractor and they put them into a training program at a Associated Builders and Contractors, Associated General Contractors, or are they in a union apprenticeship program? And what are those on and off ramps that people can get on and off throughout their career? The construction industry is one of the few industries where you can start off as a helper laborer and within 15 to 20 years be the owner of your own company, if you have the drive to be able to do that. And so that is what is the part people don't understand about the industry. 99% of the people that are out there see construction as what's going on in their neighborhood. Is there a house being built? Are there communities that are going up? They don't see the overall part of construction, and they don't see all aspects of the industry. They see only those men and women that are out there working those jobs. They don't see what happens to the other 80% of the jobs that are back at the headquarters, where you have your business and finance department, you have your transportation department, you have the logistics and everything else that goes with an industry that people don't understand about. And so I think that's the beauty of what we're able to do, is to help people see, sort of pull that curtain back and see what's really behind the industry and what are those opportunities.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into the industry, and you're exactly right. When people think of construction, the first thing they think about is labor,
Mm-hmm.
or someone essentially hammering a nail. And
Right.
their view is very rudimentary. And you're absolutely right that this education and this mindset shift and this introduction of the crafts needs to start at a younger age.
Mm-hmm.
It should be something that's talked about as early as possible, not when someone is looking at, do I want to go to trade school? Do I want to go to high school? Do I want a 4-year degree after that? Do I want to work it in the field? It's something that needs to happen, I think, a lot earlier than what it is. The other point you raise with, again, people thinking of construction as just labor, they never get a chance to see the estimator, the architects, the project managers, the superintendents, operations, logistics, transportation, leadership. Again, that view is just very rudimentary. It's very basic.
Mhm.
And encouraging people to learn about more than just labor, I think is a really good first step, and letting it happen early is a good step as well. Oftentimes the folks I meet, they got into construction because it's something that their family did, and their dad was a builder or a laborer or owned a firm, and his dad did the same thing. And I think that the biggest shift is going to be shifting this from a family and generational thing to a more widespread accepted, really a whole career and a viable career choice. One other challenge that we see is not just the skills gap not being filled, but the impact that it's having on firms that are trying to hire. The biggest gap that we see is entry to mid-level, and then very niche, very specific senior level positions.
Mhm.
What are you seeing out there with companies?
The same gaps right now is what we're seeing. Uh, Superintendent level, we have several. So I don't know the exact number of superintendents that are going to be at that retirement age within the next 5 to 10 years. And there is a gap between that superintendent and that mid-management level. And there isn't really a progression or a real training part that makes somebody prepared. They may be a very good field superintendent and get a project done very well, but they may not know the business side of how does that work, and how do we get that training up and moving faster, so that we have that next group. And so, as you said, it is that trickle effect, and we do have the craft going into that mid-management, and mid-management going up into the superintendent. So yeah, it's all across the board. Our main goal is really to figure out how do we get more people into all aspects of the industry, not just that craft side. There are those other opportunities for individuals to move up within a company, and how can we help companies take what we are able to provide in that training aspect and utilize it in different areas within their own companies. It is very interesting to talk to, whether they're a self-performing contractor or a GC that subs everything out. We see it on both sides, especially that GC who's subbing everything out. They are having the hardest time. Those subs are having the hardest time finding those craft professionals to come on board. A lot of them are telling us, you give us somebody that can pass a drug test, that will show up on time, that can work in a team. I'll hire them and I'll be able to train them as what I need them to be able to do, which is fantastic. If you have a really good training program,
Yes.
will allow somebody to have a progression, and they're not just pigeonholed into this one area of that company, or in this one area of the profession. The ultimate idea would be to have all of these opportunities available. And when you start into that industry, you understand that this is where I could go within my career path. And we talked about this earlier. A lot of people just don't understand what is available there.
Agreed. One particularly useful and immediate, I guess, implementation for training is with the grow your own. And by grow your own, typically firms in the trades and in the crafts, they've had one of two options when it comes to hiring. Essentially hiring someone to do the job for immediate, urgent, or positions they can't fill internally. Or the other option is grow your own, train them, build them up. We want project engineers to become project managers one day, and junior estimators to become estimators and grow it into senior estimators and directors of estimating. That's great. But something that's really interesting about the training that your firm offers is it allows firms to essentially start the process of training folks and helping them grow their own, so that when it comes time to fill a position, more often than not, hopefully they're able to look internally rather than having to look externally.
Mhm.
So where do you see the training being implemented immediately? And what challenges, I guess, do you see in companies trying to get people on board with that internally?
A lot of it is buy-in
Mhm.
from those organizations. Is it worth us to be able to do that? If I train somebody and my competitor is offering 50 cents more an hour, is that person going to go to that other company? The caveat to that is, if I don't train them and they stay, what happens to them? Do we have anything that's available that will make them want to have buy-in? And I think that's the ultimate goal, is that buy-in from a company that makes the training aspect part of the culture. I don't want to really work for an organization that doesn't have a good culture that I'm going to be able to advance in, and you're going to end up leaving. And that's where a lot of organizations could be in the next few years, if they're not being able to offer training and progression for those individuals as they bring them up throughout the trades. And even within that management side, am I equipping my mid-level managers to be those really good managers, or am I just taking the guy who was the best foreman on a crew and move them up without really doing any training for them to make them a better mid manager as they go along? So it's hard to put one thing on as a band-aid that would fix it all, but it really is this idea of a company buying into training, and it has to be a top-down driven model. You have to have the upper echelon of the company believe it's valuable to
Yeah.
trickle down to the craft professional.
Agreed. It starts at the leadership level. It's really hard to get anyone to buy into something if the leaders aren't walking the walk. It's funny, you bring up some good points. A lot of the smaller and mid-sized companies that we work with, they come to us and say, how do we grow? How do we grow? What are the big guys doing differently? And big guys, I mean, you think of the J.E. Dunns, the Skanskas, et cetera, of the world. And I tell them it's two things. One, it's hire the right person. And hiring the right person is twofold. You hire for where you're at, but you hire with somebody who can take you in the direction you want to go. And then two is training. You look at those larger companies, and the Arcos, the AEComs, Skanskas, J.E. Dunns, great companies, but something they do very right is train. People go there not only for the name recognition and good comp, but they know most of the time, especially for entry and mid-level, they're going to get a world-class education that's very hard for them to get at some of these smaller and mid-level companies. And I think the reason for that is the leadership at those larger companies, they see the value in what it is that they do. They've been around the block long enough to know it works, and they're committed to investing in their people. Mm-hmm. And you probably see it as much as I do. There's a reason that people want to work at those bigger firms, and it's more than just stability and finance. They know that they're going to get a world-class education because those firms are invested in their people.
Right. And, one of the things that is sort of missing in that is those small, mid to small contractors that
Mm-hmm.
may not have a training department, and they're going to have to rely on somebody else. So where do they go get that? A lot of people have not looked at the community college system as mm-hmm. as a training opportunity that they could take advantage of, whether they can get WIOA funding, or are there certain economic grants that are out there that those smaller contractors can take advantage of for that particular training? Or have they really looked at the idea of approaching those types of organizations, community colleges per se, and saying, look, we have a demand here and we have a need. As the community college, you should help us meet this demand within our industry. And how can they how can they put the spark back in these training programs and get them started back up in areas where they may have had a very strong carpentry program, they may have had a very strong HVAC or welding program, but due to an economic downturn, those programs went away. But now we're starting mm-hmm. to pick back up. And how do they start those programs back up?
Great. You brought up something there that I don't think a lot of firms are even remotely familiar with, especially at the small and mid-sized levels. When you're mentioning community college grants funding,
Mhm.
that's really interesting. And I don't think a lot of companies are aware of that. So can you dive in a little bit more into that and talk more about that?
Well, the community college arm is really that connection between industry and education. High
Mhm.
school programs are a great training tool to get those individuals aware. The real training, whether it's going to be an apprenticeship style training or it's going to be a registered apprenticeship program, can happen in those community colleges. And those are the best ways to partner with a group that already has established programs that are out there. They do have grant writers. They do have people that work with the workforce and workforce arms within those general communities, and ways to attract people into those programs. You know, are we going to do a fast start program where we're going to do a 6-week training program to get people into the industry? NCCR has one that we are developing with our core curriculum that will allow somebody to go through and get the basics of what they need to know in the construction industry to be safe and not get hurt and not get somebody else hurt, but also get their OSHA certification that goes along with that. And that's what the more smaller contractors need to look at. Are they just a very specialty contractor that only is doing 3 or 4 things? They're not doing all carpentry. They may just be a framing crew that comes out and they just do framing. They may be just a group that does specialty welding and they're just going to do aluminum welding, or they're going to do pipe welding. That's all they're going to do. How can they make sure that those individuals that are going through those particular programs are very skilled in those aspects? And if they want to continue on doing something else, there's an opportunity later on down the road for those individuals. But looking at what is the need within the community, what are those opportunities that are available through, whether it is here in Florida, whether it's the career source that individuals can go through to see where are those demands and what are those funds that are available to help do that upskill training. There is CARES Act funding right now for those men and women that have been displaced due to the pandemic. There are all sorts of individual grants that can target minority populations. They can target women in construction. This happens to be Women in Construction Week, and so how do we get more women into programs? And there's lots of information out there. You just have to be able to figure out where to go to. The community colleges within your area are a very good place to start looking, as well as those workforce economic departments within a county or within a city, to be able to find out where those grants and where are pockets of money that people can take advantage of.
Excellent. And you brought up a topic that I don't think gets enough attention: women in construction.
Mhm.
Some view it as controversial. I view it as necessary. And I say controversial because there's a lot of firms that are stuck in this old school, old way of thinking and just believe that construction should be a male dominated industry. And I disagree. I think that's wrong. I think that's archaic. Um, and I think women don't get enough of a fair shot to really have it as an option. I mean, you put 100 women in a room, 100 men in a room, and you say, raise your hand if you want to be in construction. Many more male hands will go up than women. And I think that's a stigma that needs to be broken. And I'm glad that there's, Women in Construction Week. They should be celebrated. They should be seen as individuals who are just as capable
Mhm.
as men. And it's really a subject that doesn't get enough attention. And I think a lot of companies shy away from it because they think it's controversial. And I'm curious to hear, what are your thoughts for how we can get and invite more women into the construction and trades workplace, and how can we make it a career that is seen as viable and something that they want to do, make it more enticing?
I think it starts with, as you said, that stigma. what
Mhm.
does the industry have as a whole? It's been male dominated since the construction industry was around, was
Mhm.
invented. How do we look at this idea that women are just as capable as men, and probably in some craft areas are probably better skilled and better talented to be able to
Mhm.
do some different things. So, we work with organizations all across, whether it's the associate general contractors, associate builder contractors, just general organizations, to figure out how do we go out and tell women and anybody about the opportunities within the industry. We work closely with the National Association of Women in Construction. We work with the National Women in Roofing. There are several other organizations that are out there that are geared towards getting women into the programs. And it really starts going back to what we talked about earlier, is really exposing young girls what are those options within the industry. We sort of guide young ladies in a high school program that you're not going into the construction side, but this is an opportunity to expose them and let them see what are those opportunities that are out there, what are available. I tell you, women are more detailed, and they are very good welders when it comes down to that hand-eye coordination. They're very much detail oriented. So plumbers, pipe fitters, carpenters, you name it, we have women in all aspects of the industry. What we have to do is to start making it a area that, I'm not sure how to say this, but it really is this opportunity for us to highlight those women and put them on a pedestal, to show that this is a prime example of what I can do, and to be able to pull myself up out of a situation that may have not have been a situation that I chose to be in, that I have been able to progress and move up in my career. There's nothing wrong with women welders, women roofers, everything that is out there. They are totally viable, and we really do admire the women that move up, not only in the crafts, but also in the management side, any aspect of the construction industry. We like to see that aspect. We really want to move this idea of getting women that have, and even women that have been in this transition stage of life. They want to do something else. Let's get them into training programs. Let's get them exposed to what the industry is all about.
Great. My mom tells me a story that when she was younger and she was in shop class, that there were just a couple of boys at the time who weren't okay with that. And they harassed her about it. They gave her trouble about it. And I remember in high school going through shop class, no one was bothering or harassing women in shop class, but the women who really enjoyed it, they were kind of seen as different or strange by a lot of people. And that was a stigma, I think, that a lot of women carry with them. So I think that if we're to do this successfully in the right way and to make this more enticing and inviting, it not only needs to start at the company level, but it needs to start at the educational level and really at the family level. If mothers, fathers, caretakers can tell their children, both men and women, that this is a great career, you should be able to pursue it if you want to do it, and not have that stigma, I think that's going to go a long way. I look at the numbers, and I think last I checked, the numbers were about 93 to 97% male dominated, depending on the industry and sector. And not only are you, not really giving a fair shot to half of the population, but from an economic point of view, it's an entire half of a population that can fill the gap.
Yeah, and we look at this as not whether you're a man or a woman that can
Mhm.
do a job. It's, are you a professional that's been trained that can do
Mhm.
the best job? And
Exactly.
we want those individuals, whether they are depending on whatever gender you are, that you come and you get trained, you show up to the job sites, you are the best craft professional that you can be. And that's one of the things we here at NCCR have had this motto of the craft professional. We don't refer to blue collar workers. We don't refer to them as middle school or middle skilled workers. These are craft professionals because they have made a profession out of their job, and they are honing their skills and continuing to do that learning, which makes them those true professionals in any aspect of the industry that goes out.
Agreed. Agreed. Where do you see companies evolving over the next few years to really, I guess, implement that training and implementing, I guess, making the industry as a whole more welcoming? And we touched on that earlier, but I'm curious if after our discussion here, you've thought of anything else you'd add to that?
I think it's just broadening the scope of what they want to do and how they want to do this training. And it's not one size fit all. It's not this idea of one training arm is going to be able to do everything. There may have to be multiple ways to do training within a company themselves, and whether that's through HR and that corporate side of training, what does that look like for this whole environment, and how do we get the culture pulled together for a company? And then the training aspect will hopefully fall within that that whole idea of this corporate vision, and training has another aspect. And then where do we take training, and what are those different crafts that are associated with it? How many people do we want to bring into the workforce? We want to bring as many people as we can into that workforce, but the idea is companies can only hire so many people. We have a million plus person shortage in the construction industry. Not one company is going to be able to solve that. So it's really looking across that board of, if every company hired X amount of people, then we could really have that skills gap solved. But we have to get those people trained. We have to get those people interested in the industry. So it's really going to take a whole lot of work by the companies, contractors, associations, even our friends that are in the in the union and organized labor, to really look at this breadth of people that we have out there. Because all of these organizations, and regardless if you're in the hospitality industry, you're in the automotive industry, you're in the health science industry, you're still trying to get the best people from a small portion of people that are in training programs. And that's what we have to do, is figure out how do we get the best people and as many people into these industries as we can, and make sure that they are truly trained and they understand what that industry has to offer and where they can go within that industry.
Agreed. And thanks for adding to that. Curious, one of the biggest things that keeps a lot of owners and leadership up at night in construction, architecture, engineering, and those trades is the prospect of uncertainty over the next year. The sense that we got from a lot of firms last year is 2020 seemed to be great, in the sense that they had projects, and the projects that stuck, they stuck. What they were really concerned about is that 2021 was the year of uncertainty. Which projects would be stopped, which would never come to fruition, which would fall through. What is your outlook for the industries as a whole over the next year and over the next 5-10 years? We're not holding you to this.
Yeah, and I don't know. If I had the crystal ball, I wouldn't be here. I'd be doing something else,
Right.
to have that answer. I think I think depending upon where your projects are located and where you're going after some of those jobs and those bids, you're going to see more work in certain sectors. I think that maybe the industrial sector, petrochemical may slow down a little bit. Residential is going through the roof right now, so
It's nuts.
here, if you have a new house that's being built or an old house that is being renovated and they go on the market, they're bought before
Gone.
before you can click, I would like that house on Zillow or anything. So,
Yeah.
those areas that we're seeing a true advance in infrastructure. I think if the infrastructure bill ever gets passed, we will see a huge need for that heavy civil work. I think there'll be a lot of civil work that'll be going on. The big mega projects, I don't think you'll see a lot of big mega projects over the next few years. I think those will slow down. But I think your mid-size contractors will be doing pretty good with, apartment buildings. I think that we'll see a big increase in some commercial sites, especially warehouse areas. I know Amazon is building warehouse distribution centers all over the United States, and I think we'll see different pockets as we go along. So I don't know. There was a talk that was done by Anibal Basal from ABC talking about the economic outlook, and I can't remember. One of the things that he said was, 2021 is going to be this weird year. Nobody's sure what's really going to happen and where everything's going to go. So I think vaccines will possibly help in some areas to give people a little bit more confidence that we'll have a workforce, that we'll have more jobs coming out. But we'll see. I don't know. If you had the answer, I'd love to hear what you had to say.
A lot of what we're seeing is both geographical and niche or industry specific. Multifamily in suburban areas, the tier 2, tier 3 cities is on fire. That's doing well. Single family home builders and large site developers are doing very well.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're going to continue to do well. And certain geographies are doing better than the others. What we're finding is there are just pockets of the country that are doing better for a multitude of reasons. And I think those areas will continue to do well. And one thing that I think doesn't get talked about enough is right now the US as a whole is undergoing a shifting population where folks are moving from one area to the country to the other. And what seemed like anecdotes a year ago is really starting to play out. Folks are, flocking to the Southeast, to the Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
And I think firms that are well positioned and investing in their staff and in their training are going to continue to do really well. So a lot of what we're seeing is really what area of the country do you live in and what niche are you in? Warehouses are doing really well. Cold storage, healthcare is doing exceptionally well. Other areas like retail are not doing as well with storefront. Office space is not doing as well as it was a year ago, but a lot of that too is depending on what area of the country you're in. So I think that you're going to see some trends develop over the next 6 to 12 months. And it's going to be interesting to see, do those trends continue over the next 10 years? Do they become permanent? Or with vaccine rollout and easing of restrictions, do things return in one way or another to what we were seeing through the beginning of 2019?
Yeah, I
don't know.
Yeah, I
no one knows.
So I got a question for you, Jeff, is really, as we start seeing this, and what are your thoughts on trends of company workforces becoming more remote workforces? I know a lot of companies have taken their upper management and have said, look, you don't have to come into the office. You can work remotely. You can do all these different things from home. And a lot of these companies are, as you said, some of those business office spaces are totally open. There's nobody in a lot of offices anymore. And a lot of companies are downsizing what their actual internal staff is looking like within an office, and then it's being expanded out to this remote workforce. So what are you seeing as a trend moving forward with that?
Yeah, I love put the interview in the hot seat. I
Yeah,
love
let's
it. Keep
do that.
the questions running, please. One thing that we've noticed, and I'm speaking both for my division here, which is recruiting in construction, architecture, engineering, manufacturing, and speaking for other divisions like IT, accounting, finance. When remote work started accelerating, and by accelerating, I mean it's been on the rise for a couple of years for certain industries. Technology, software is one of them. The push that we heard was remote is great. I can't wait till it becomes more widespread. I love the idea. You know, if companies don't offer it, they're going to be doomed. And I remember having conversations with, colleagues and saying, just be careful what you wish for, because if something seems great for everybody, there's usually ramifications for it. And what we've noticed is there are some positions in the craft world that can be done remotely. Some don't require you to be at the office every day. Some do. They require you to be at the job site because you're building stuff, you're managing folks. It is what it is. So I've been really impressed with how some firms in these industries have adapted.
Mhm.
It's been tough. You can only have so many Zoom meetings in a day before you hit the leave meeting button, close the computer, shut off the camera, and call it a day.
Right.
So I've been impressed by how a lot of firms are, I guess, not only reacting, but really how they're innovating and getting used to it. We've had multiple firms that say for certain positions, it's remote. And it's been good because they've not only opened up, their talent pool at the city level, but now it's at the state, at the geographical, or, they can hire folks across the country for certain positions. What we've noticed in other industries, especially in technology, is folks in tech are starting to see with certain skill sets that they're no longer as desirable as they were, a year ago. And what I mean by that is we're seeing this a lot at the entry and mid-level, not so much for super niche specific and senior folks,
Mhm.
but what started as, okay, the company is saying, now I'm remote, let's try this out. Okay, this is good. My tech workers are happy. I can hire folks, no problem. Now they're saying, well, we're in a very expensive area like LA, San Francisco,
Mhm.
Boston, New York. Let's try hiring somebody an hour or two out. If we absolutely need them to come into the office at some point, it's available. And then it became, well, this is working pretty well. Let's try hiring somebody in a different part of the US with a lower cost of living.
Right.
So firms in those areas were hiring people in Texas, Alabama, Missouri, North, South Dakota. And they find that their costs not only went down 30 to 60% in some cases, but they were getting the best that state had to offer.
Mhm.
If they were paying folks $200,000 a year, they could pay someone $100,000 a year, which was not only half of what they were paying, but that person was getting 20 or 30% more than they could ever get for a company in that state. And then the more recent shift that we've seen for certain positions in those industries, and I guess this affects some aspects of construction that are technical focused, is companies were saying, well, we tried hiring remote, that was great. Then we hired in a different state, different part of the country. Now certain positions are being outsourced altogether, either to an outsourcing company or to different countries with lower cost of living.
Mhm.
So when I said be careful what you wish for, this is somewhat as to what I was alluding to. Thankfully, the craft profession, most of that is not going to be able to be outsourced. It's not going to be automated. It's not going to be able to be shipped to somebody who's not only a knowledge worker, but a hands-on experience worker as well.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, I think the positions that can be done remotely by skilled professionals who know the industry, who are licensed, trained, that's going to continue to happen.
Yeah.
The positions that aren't able to be remote, there's just really no substitution for it. But the flip side of that, of what we're seeing, is the folks who never wanted to be in an office to begin with, they're more than happy to be out there and to be working when everyone else is at home.
Yeah. And you asked earlier, one of the questions was, where do we see one of the next big pushes coming? And I think one of the next big ones is going to actually be in modular construction.
Yes.
How do we move these, how do we do something off-site, move it on-site, and really get it down to a science? We're just moving pieces of a building in and out. We're getting them fabbed over here. We're setting them up over here, and it works perfectly. So, I think that's going to be the next one of those next evolutions that comes into the industry.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I remember talking about that with companies who were specializing in that 5-6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, people who didn't believe in it, they'd look at it like it was a crackpot theory, but there was definitely something there. And you're starting to see a shift and a real preference to that style for a multitude of reasons. I'm sure we don't have time to get into, but I think that's one trend.
Quicker, it's cheaper. It's going to be, a lot less blueprint or ground space that you're going to take up in an area.
Mm-hmm.
And it just moves jobs along a lot faster as they go along. So, and you were saying hospitals are a big area where they're seeing that modular component system come into play too.
And the hospital is interesting too, because I think with everything that's happened, many states and cities and populations have just realized that, personal opinion here, but I just don't think there were enough hospitals to begin with. Especially in more rural areas, and especially in tier 2, tier 3. I mean, in tier 1 cities, tier 1 being the Bostons, New York, we're going sheerly off of population here. You could walk to an urgent care, walk to a hospital, take a taxi, an Uber, whatever. But at the rural level, especially as more people start to get out to the burbs, folks are realizing that there's just simply not enough healthcare available to them out there. And healthcare has certainly become front and center for a lot of folks. And I think that industry is going to continue to do exceptionally well as more people move to new areas and realize we probably need 2 or 3 or 4 times the healthcare facilities that we have here.
Yeah. One of the things we're seeing here in Florida is that movement of people into the state, and we're looking at an elderly population that's coming on. So whether it's a new hospital build or an expansion to an existing hospital, we're seeing that take place a whole lot. And one thing that we didn't touch on, I know we're running out of time, but we've talked about the building, the built environment, and how do we get people to build things that are going on. Another aspect of construction that people don't really think about is that maintenance aspect. We have all of these facilities that are available, that are built. How are they maintained? And that is another group that has to be trained to be able to operate and make sure all of those facilities are up and running and continue to run, especially hospitals, airports, all those large areas that are very important to commerce. We need to make sure that we have that ability to have individuals trained moving forward in that area.
The trend we've seen for years was a lot of that was handled by a third party. It was contracted out. But what we're starting to see, and we're seeing a lot of this in healthcare and in different industries, is that folks are trying to bring that more in-house because they want more control. They want, they want to know what's going on, right? They want boots in the ground. They want a view into that. So, I think the companies that are contracted out to do that, they'll do well. They're always going to do well. There's always going to be a need for that, but you're starting to see a lot of that facilities maintenance and facilities management as well. You're seeing those starting to become in-house. I've lost count of how many companies have come to us saying, we need a facilities manager, we need someone in maintenance, we need this, we need that. It's everywhere. And I guess you could almost say they're starting to become self-performing in a way and bringing that stuff in-house.
Yeah. And whether that's their cost saving or whatever they want to do, whatever their bottom line is that they're
Mhm.
trying to get to. Yeah, we see more and more organizations coming to us to talk about facilities management and what does that look like? Because, facilities management in a petrochemical plant looks totally different than
Yeah.
facility management in a manufacturing plant or a warehouse.
Mhm.
So, how do you define that and what does that look like is really something we're grasping with right now.
And do you feel that NCCR is well positioned to be able to accommodate that training need for the future?
I think we are. We just have to get our heads wrapped around what are the needs of all of those aspects of the industry, because they're all a little different as it comes into play as what that skill set is that somebody needs for those areas.
What we're telling people is we're seeing about 10 to 15 years of changes being accelerated into the next 1-2 years. So
Mhm.
firms that are agile, able to adapt and get in front of changes and not get caught behind, they're going to do well. But I remind people, we're seeing 10 to 15 years of changes, trends, and massive transformations happen within 1 or 2 years. So I think facilities is definitely one of them.
Mhm. I would agree with that. And automation is going to play a huge part of
Huge.
what that maintenance looks like too.
Yeah, we're seeing on the automation side, the building automation systems. I mean, the stuff that they're doing now compared to what they were doing 5 years ago is incredible.
Mhm.
Not only with the consultants we work with, the consulting firms, but even some of the bigger players, both on the installation, the maintenance side, and the OEMs. I know we're running short here on time. We're bumping up against our windows. So before we go, you had mentioned some really great resources, CARES Act, community colleges, grants funding. If you could share with our viewers, our listeners, a list of maybe 3 to 5 resources you recommend that they check out, what would that be?
I would look at Department of Labor, look at some of their grants that are out there, Department of Education, see
Mhm.
what types of grants are available um, for displaced workers, for training purposes as a whole. I would look at NCCER for resources that we have available as far as where is training occurring, what are some of those recruiting resources that are available to get individuals interested into the industry. And then, really that last one is look within your own community as to where those pockets of training are occurring and where's some of that funding that could be out there.
Okay, great. And if folks wanted to reach you, what's the best way to reach you?
Reach me at dbelcher@nccer.org, or just look us up at www.nccer.org.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your time, Dan. It's been great having you in the podcast. Thanks for your company, for letting you come on here, and we appreciate your time.
All right, appreciate it, Jeff. Have a great day.
You too.